So, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Welcome to Gordon.
Thank you. A lot of benefits to Levita, including finding a wife in my case. That was really nice of you to remind me of that, Rich. Also to be reminded of the experience with the prison and the prisoners. The one thing the warden said when I went in to ask him if we could figure this out and get the prisoners involved in an adventure experience, he said, first of all, the reason I want to work with you, it's not about all that adventure stuff. It's because the people who will come alongside our prisoners are Christians. Then he went on to say 80% of the people who leave the prison will come back. The recidivism is awful, as you know, in terms of people going back to prison after they've served time. He then went on to say that 80% who leave the prison following Jesus will not come back. The power of Jesus in the middle of adventure, the middle of wilderness, and so on. I'd like to also acknowledge the lovely day. How you all doing? Walking around in this, pretty nice, huh? But I do want to say that even though chaplains and ministers are really good at a lot of things, predicting the weather is probably not something that we should leave to them. The prediction that this is the way it's going to be the rest of the fall and winter may not be quite what Greg said to us. I have a daughter here with me today who was a Gordon student, and I got reports from Gordon in January. Well, let's go back to the text, if we could, a little bit, and follow that story. The lawyer was questioning Jesus about what was the essence of living the life. At that time, the life is represented in the Torah. And of course, then Jesus turned the question right back to him, and he said, well, what is it? And he went into the portion of Scripture read today that goes back to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, the ancient law, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and then in all your spirit, and then loving your neighbor as yourself. And the lawyer said, well, tell me some more about this. What does it mean to really love your neighbor? What is that about? And Jesus said, well, let me tell you a story. And of course, this was one of the great parables that we all refer to. And Jesus told many, many stories, many parables to illustrate his point. And this one is particularly poignant, I believe, because there is not only what we take from it in terms of the notion of serving others and giving, the Good Samaritan. We have laws called Good Samaritan laws. We have an organization called Samaritan's Purse. The reference to the Samaritan is around giving. But I think there's some other elements to the story, to the parable, that I think we should get into, and I think it connects to our being here today at Gordon and talking about Levita. This was Jesus' last trip to Jerusalem. He was on his way to the capital. Eventually, he would be on trial. He would be crucified, and there would be the resurrection. So he knew what was happening. So this was a particularly important trip for him. He had traveled through a portion of Galilee that included villages and elements along the way that were predominantly Samaritan villages. and he was not treated well there. A good reason why he shouldn't have used the Samaritan as an example, as an exemplar of service. The Samaritans were half-breeds in the eyes of the Jews. The Samaritans were people, descendants of the Assyrians who had conquered a portion of the lands that were occupied by the children of Israel and had intermarried with many of the Jewish people and practiced some form of the Jewish faith that the high priest thought was not worthy of even discussing. So this was the context. Jesus lifting up the Samaritan. He could have easily gone to another example. First of all, he, as we know in the story, he talked about the priest. He talked about the Levite passing on the other side. And the people in the audience, the people listening to him, very likely people from in that area would have said, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for you to say the hero of the story is going to be the shepherd. The hero of the story is going to be the person who does the weaving, the tent maker. The hero of the story is going to be somebody that we can relate to. But what did Jesus do? He went to the despised one. If there was an S word of the day, it would have been referring to the Samaritan, as far as the Jewish people. Why did he do this? He essentially changed the conversation to a discussion or an understanding of service in the context of the other. And like so many things that Jesus did, he did something and emphasized something that people were not expecting. The heroes of the story were people like the women at the well, or the woman at the well. He acknowledged children. On the Sermon on the Mount, he acknowledged he acknowledged the poor. But why would he talk about the Samaritan? The Samaritan represented not just the person, the persona, but it was the act of the Samaritan that was most important. Because when he was questioned again by the lawyer, he responded, "Go and do likewise." It was not necessary, the idea of service was not connected to the identity of the person. If that was the case, he would not have selected a Samaritan. But he selected the Samaritan to represent him crossing out of this norm of service only was to your own kind, to the people of your tribe, the people of your background, the people of the Gordon community, the people of the community of your church. It was bringing you outside, as Rich would say, outside the comfort zone, into a community that you're not familiar with. There are many examples of how the Gordon experience and the Levita experience represent a breakthrough into the idea of loving your neighbor. There's a context not far from here in Lynn where many Gordon students are now working and providing tutoring services to young people from outside the Gordon community. I would strongly suggest as well that there are other ways in which the Gordon community, especially the faculty, could examine the idea of service learning and bring it across the curriculum into science, for example. There's a dramatic downturn in the fishing industry just up the coast in Gloucester. What's behind that? Could not the Gordon science students have played some role in examining that? Could not Gordon students work effectively as tutors and mentors to new people coming to this country from other countries who don't speak English as their first language? A lot of the things that's going on out of the Lynn Civic Engagement project and program. In literature and English, could there not be guidebooks written in other languages or translated in a way that people from, again, other countries could use those materials? These are challenges, I would say, to the larger Gordon community. I'd also like to issue a challenge to those of you students who are prospective students. I came out of the military. I was an infantry officer, jumped out of airplanes, was an Army Ranger. When I came back from service in Korea, I said there's got to be another way to come together around a shared goal that had nothing to do with violence and war. The notion of mission trips is extremely important, but I want to challenge you further. What about a mission that takes longer than 2 or 3 weeks? What about a mission for a year or more? The Mormon Church, for example, has a terrific model of several years required for their young people as a part of their matriculation into full adulthood within that church. Why not, coming out of Gordon, spending time with Dana and Brandy Bates and their work in Romania? This is a very dramatic and significant outgrowth of the Levita experience. What about something in depth where there is a degree of sacrifice, where you are really contributing? Let me give you a final example of what I mean by the Samaritans and Samaritans around us, and how they, in fact, not only provide an illustration in this story, but how they can move our lives. I worked in the core city of St. Louis for a number of years, and one experience I had, I was working with a group of people who were high school age, and they were doing tutoring and mentoring for middle school kids during the week. As a lead up to the activity at the centers that they were at, there were about 1,500 middle and elementary schools in the city of St. Louis. As a lead up to it and opening up of the morning, there was an aerobics instruction class, and one of the young people that I had noticed was a guy by the name of Derek Jackson. Derek was a classic, strong young man. He could have been a tight end on a Boston College football team. He was really a terrific guy. He came into the aerobics class, he walked by me, took part in the instruction for a little while, but then turned around and walked out. Derek was not the type of guy that would shirk anything. He was the kind of guy that would be the first to commit, the first to do something in depth. So I walked out and I got down next to him, I said, Derek, what's going on? He's sitting down there to stuff. He said, well, my leg hurts. 6'2", about 210. Derek, kicked in aerobics class. Give me a break. Well, as I was driving with Derek shortly thereafter to the hospital, and he was hanging onto his leg because there was a bullet hole in his leg, and his leg was bleeding. I said to Derek, why in the world didn't you say something about the fact that you had been shot the night before? Well, it was not all that unusual in core city St. Louis as it is in core city Boston, Chicago, and other core cities for there to be violence. But what was different was that Derek had taken public transportation to get to our center, had spent time in aerobics class, and then finally, he let me know that he had been shot. Why did you do it, Derek? Why didn't you say something? He said, he's about 17. He said, those kids this summer need me, and I was afraid that I would lose my job. A young person of the city, a young person on the way to dropping out in many core cities, a Samaritan teaching me. Who are the Samaritans among you? The people that you don't recognize, who are not doing the things that you expect them to do. You'll find a lot of them in Levita, because Levita draws out people in ways that you don't expect, providing an example, providing servant leadership, doing the kinds of things that sometimes we don't recognize. Many of you are servant leaders. Many of you are and will be good Samaritans. Listen to Jesus, though, when he says, go and do. That's what he said to the lawyer, go and do. Amen.